What do you want to be caught doing 72 hours to your PMP exam or your CAPM exam? You want to be caught looking at the key things that you need to get back into your head, stuff that you might have looked at very early in the process but you ended up forgetting. So this video is really to run through those top things, top formulas and terms. It's not an all-inclusive list, but these are some key terms that if you don't have them in your head, you definitely need to go back to the drawing board. Go online. Wikipedia is a good place to look for definitions, or just go back to the PMBOK guide. Go to the glossary. Read up these terms. Formulas. You absolutely need to know these formulas. Now, when you hear about formulas on the exam, don't get caught up in applying the formula verbatim. There's actually key information that you're going to have to extract by using the formula on the question. So don't think it's going to be served to you just like that. For example, you might have to derive your ETC and use that to derive earned value. You think how? Well, you have to know the formulas, all the formulas for earned value. So 72 hours to your exam. I advise you to do these things. Go to www.pmpmockexam.com. We've got all sorts of subscriptions to mock exams. Now you'd be like, why do I need to do a mock exam? Just so that you can gauge yourself, find out where you are. We've got some pretty realistic exams up there, and you definitely need to take these exams. Now if you're already a student of ours, I'm talking about the PMP Mock Exam, CAPM Mock Exam, the Risk Management Stress Test, or the PMP and CAPM exam stress test, or the risk checkup. Those are the kind of exams and quizzes you need to be doing 72 hours to your exam. Now, even if you've done them before, do them again. Why? We've got over 600 questions, and all of those questions need to be read, need to be looked at, because there are terms in there that you need to know the definitions for, because you could actually find those in other questions. So, purpose of this webinar, very quickly, talk about the key terms and have a quick check. If you haven't taken realistic mock exams that have kind of pushed you over the edge, you haven't started yet, go to pmpmockexam.com, get a quick subscription there if you're taking it in the next few hours or few days. Strongly advise you to take these mock exams, because you don't want to be caught unaware, of the kind of questions you could find on the real exam. Now you might have been taking some other online quizzes here and there, and you're like, oh well, I got like a 90 in this, I got like an 85. I'm telling you, you need to take some good mock exams that will push you over the edge and really solidify your knowledge. Because until you get to that point that you're taking not the namby-pamby mock exams, but those mock exams that will, they're still in context but will push you to the limit. I'm not talking about doing mock exams that are, testing you on stuff that's not in the real exam. That's not what I'm talking about, because there are many like that out there that will freak you out. They have all sorts of terms that are not on the real exam. But I'm talking about taking a realistic mock exam that will be in the context of either the PMP or CAPM, and not too out there, but pushing you over the edge. It's important. So, let's jump straight into it. Let's talk about the formulas and the concepts. So, chapter 1, 2, and 3, I'm assuming that you've gone through those. You definitely know about organizational process assets in detail, what they are. Talking about the corporate knowledge base, talking about all those templates and things that belong to the organization that roll up under organizational process assets. Talking about enterprise environmental factors, hopefully you know about that. Project phases. So I'm not really going to dwell on all those things, because you do need to know those. Organization types, matrix, functional, and composite and all that. Absolutely need to know about those ones. Projectized. Watch out for those curveball questions, such as, in which organization is the project manager the strongest or not as strong, or in which matrix organization is the functional manager strongest, things like that. So be able to juggle those questions around in your head. So chapters 1, 2 and 3, alright? Now moving on to chapter 4. Remember, in the PMBOK guide we don't talk about project selection methods, which will probably be going away come August to some degree in the new exam. But for now, you do need to know that. So, project selection methods, we'll be talking about that later on, but most importantly, the processes. You do need to know the processes in order, especially if you're taking the CAPM. Develop project charter, develop project management plan. You need to be able to rattle those off all the way to close project or phase. In addition, you need to know all the inputs. Develop project charter is a big one because you've got some kind of new documents that you've never heard of, right? Or that you wouldn't have heard of until now. Talking about the business case, talking about the contract, talking about the statement of work, those things. So do know about the inputs to developing your project charter. Know where they're from, know the details. Project management plan. Know all of the inputs to developing your project management plan and know what your project management plan is made of. So go to page 350 in the PMBOK guide and read this up. I'm talking about that table that breaks down for you everything in the project management plan. For example, if I asked you, where do you get the process improvement plan from? And you don't know, I'll be concerned. If I ask you, in which process do you develop the change management plan or the scope management plan or the cost management plan? And if you begin to name knowledge areas that happen after integration, I'm going to be concerned because all that happens where? In integration. So I'm going to be very concerned. So please know the details of those that are created as part of the develop project management plan process, like the cost management plan, the scope management plan, the schedule management plan. You create those in chapter 4. So you do need to know these things. Very good to know those. Then the difference between closed project or phase and closed procurement. Hopefully you know that you close your procurement first and then you close your project or phase. But when you think closed project or phase, don't just think about it as one term. Think about it in a practical sense. What do I do when I'm closing my project? My customer has already verified that the deliverable is good. So what on earth am I doing here? You need to know that you're formally closing all the documentation on the project. For that reason, the word administrative closure might be a bit foreign, but it was in a previous PMBOK guide. But you do need to know about administrative closure. Closing out your documentation. Lessons learned and so on. We all need to do lessons learned on our projects, make sure that they're there at the end, close out the project in a sensible way with these lessons learned. Otherwise you'll keep making the same mistakes going forward. Okay? Organizational process assets. Updates, mind you, because we update our organizational process assets at the end of the project. We need to know that. Alright? Page 350 again. Know where all of those plans are created. Cost management plan, scope management plan. Going back here, process improvement plan, change management plan, configuration management plan. If you come across any plan on page 350, you've got no idea what it is, you definitely need to look into that in chapter 4 or wherever it is created. Know where all the subsidiary plans are created in the PMBOK guide. That is so important. Moving on here, let's talk about the formulas and the concepts and a few things here and there regarding project selection methods. This is a very important part of the exam right now. Hopefully you're familiar with most of these concepts: net present value, IRR, BCR, payback period, so on. Talking about net present value, if you have net present value greater than 0, good, accept. Less than 0, not good, don't accept. NPV is equal to 0, there could be lots of other criteria. It means it's neutral, that's neutrality, but it means there could be other factors that surround the circumstance, and based on those factors you might choose to accept or reject the project. Okay? Internal rate of return, the higher the better. You've got two options. You want to take the 169% one. Now obviously it won't be that high on many projects, but always take the higher IRR. Benefit cost ratio, 2:1. You have to know that that's the same thing as 2. Different from 2.1. you always want to take the highest BCR. So if you've got 5 projects, take the one with the highest benefit cost ratio. Payback period, you always want to take the shortest payback period. Opportunity cost, you've got 2 projects, project A and project B. Let's say you accept project B. What is the opportunity cost of selecting project B over project A? It's $3. So do know that. Sunk costs, costs that you've spent cannot regain. If you've got a load of options with project A, internal rate of return is 4%, BCR on another project, project B is 3, on project C, net present value is 8. Which one do you select? Always select the one with the highest net present value. That's the trick. Net present value contains the other information that we're talking about. Things like your payback period, you're already baked in there. Your internal rate of return, it's already baked in. So talking about chapter 4, don't just take it for granted, oh, it's integration. You do need to know about the perform integrated change control process, what actually happens when you get a change request. What do you do? If you get a verbal change request, remember the project manager should always get it in writing. Then the project manager should look at it. Then the project manager should send it to the change control board. Project manager may be on the change control board. Change control board looks at the change request and either accepts it or rejects it. But at the end of the day, when you look at the outputs of perform integrated change control, remember you're going to see the change request, which means something's being rejected, or you could have the updates to the change request. So it could be a change request status update to indicate that it has been accepted and it's going to be implemented, or it's being rejected. Alright, so very important to understand that you're not going to see rejected change requests in perform integrated change control. Stuff like that. And that's why you need to know the inputs, tools and techniques and outputs of any process in great detail. Chapter 5 is all about scope management. Some of the things I'd highlight here, your variance analysis. We use this across various monitoring and controlling processes. Your WBS, how do you create it? Is it by phase? Is it by deliverable? You need to know the approach to creating the WBS. The WBS dictionary, what exactly is it? Defines the components of the WBS. Project scope statement. What is it? Where does it come from? Remember, you create the project scope statement based on several inputs. Some of those inputs are going to be given to you, and you're going to work on them and come out with the project scope statement in detail form. Remember also that when you create your WBS dictionary, and then the project scope statement, which was an input to that process, will actually give you your scope baseline. Your scope baseline consists of those 3. Going into the WBS components, know the definitions for planning packages, work packages. What's the difference between both? Which one is higher up than the other? The work package is right at the bottom. Planning package is above that. But you've got the control account level. Under the control account level, you've got the planning package level. Okay? Code of accounts. Understand what it means. If you've got a 1.1.1, what level WBS is that? If you've got a 1.4.1.1, what WBS level is that? That's a level 4. So you count the digits to get the levels. Remember that. You can also look at the WBS and eyeball it and immediately identify how many levels are in it. Very important to do. Control accounts, what are they? What do we use them for? Scope creep. What is scope creep? In which situations is a project manager meant to be preventing scope creep? At all times. So know what scope creep is. Also understand that progressive elaboration is not the same as scope creep. At all times the project manager should be involved in progressive elaboration, controlling change in an orderly fashion. Scope creep has no rhyme or reason. Scope creep creeps into the project, and it really is as a result of adding extras, gold plating. Understand what gold plating is. Decomposition. We use decomposition as a tool and technique twice in the PMBOK guide. Know where you use decomposition in scope and in time, in define activities and in create WBS. Rolling wave planning, know what it is. Product scope, the difference between product scope and project scope. Interviews, knowing that you use interviews and focus groups and prototypes and group creativity techniques and group decision making techniques to do various things such as better define your requirements and your scope. So understand where you use all of these different tools, things like the requirements traceability matrix. You have to know what it is. You have to be able to describe it, know where it's used. And validated deliverables, what are those? Where do we get them from? From verify scope. Stuff like that. That's all for chapter 5. Lots more detail. Again, you need to know all that is in the glossary as it relates to chapter 5. Chapter 6. Early start, early finish, late finish. Hopefully you know that. Critical path, knowing the definition of it, knowing that you could have negative or zero float on the critical path. So if you don't understand the aspect of there being negative float on the critical path, you might want to look into more definitions in the PMBOK. Total float and free float and project float, the difference between all those three. Knowing that to calculate your total float, you use one box, and you probably want to look at the videos we've got on the critical path, because we talk about total float being the difference between the late start and the early start, or the late finish and the early finish. Remember that. We also talk about free float being the difference between the early start of the successor. So if you've got A and B, successor of A is B, so it's the early start of B minus the early finish of A. Remember that. We talked about that in that video. So do understand how to calculate those things. Project flow, the difference between two dates that you need to calculate here. We've got the customer required due date and we've got the end date. So assume you decide to end a project on Friday and your customer's required due date is the following Friday. You've got 7 days in between, so that will be your project flow, right? The 7 days in between. So just calculate it. If your customer required due date is on the 30th and the project end date is on the 23rd, then your project float will be the 30 minus 23. Very important to know. AOA, activity on arrow, which is also known as arrow diagramming method, not in the PMBOK guide, but very important to know. Understand where you've got dummies. You've got dummies in ADM. You do not have dummies in PDM, which is the next one. Alright? Understand that you've got 4 relationship types in PDM, right, versus the one you've got in ADM. Understand how to calculate the critical path in both. You might not have any questions regarding the critical path calculation on your exam. It depends, but definitely good to know. Don't get the acronyms mixed up. Remember, AOA, A at both ends, is all about the arrow, right? ADM, arrow diagramming method, starts with an A. It's all about the A's, the arrow, right? The activity duration on the arrow. Activity on node, activity duration is on the node. Typically, AOA, the nodes are circles. AON, the nodes are squares or rectangles. Critical chain, can't overstate this. You do have to read the critical chain definition. Project buffers and feed-in buffers, and really understanding that the resource constrained critical path is really your critical chain. That's what we're talking about. So do know all the definitions for that. You could have different aspects of that definition show up in loads of questions, and you have to be able to weed what is relevant in those questions and what is not. Okay? Understand what a hammock activity is. It's really just a roll-up, a summary activity. Understand what it is. What if scenario analysis? What on earth is that? It's really just a what if. What if I do this? What will happen on the schedule? Understand what lag and lead means. Understand that lag and lead are different from float or slack. Relationship types. Finish to finish, start to finish to start, start to start. Hopefully you know that. Activity attributes. What are activity attributes? For example, someone working on an activity, a particular resource, could be an attribute. Oh, Tom's working on this activity. That could be an activity attribute. Oh, the activity is taking place in this geographic location. That could be an activity attribute. Milestones. Understanding what exactly a milestone is. It's an event and it's a zero duration event. Not the same as a task. Okay? A task has a duration, a milestone does not. It's an event, not a task. Analogous estimating. Understand you're using an analogy. What's the difference between analogous estimating and parametric estimating? Parametric estimating uses historical information. but it also employs a statistical relationship between that piece of historical information and something else. The 3-point estimate, talking about PERT analysis. If you do not know how to calculate the expected duration and you don't know how to calculate standard deviation and variance, it means you need to go back. Go back to our workbook, the PMBOK Guide Audio Digest workbook, if you've got that. Otherwise, look online, you'll probably find it. But these are important things that you need to know before the exam. Understand what an order of magnitude estimate is, how accurate it is. Strongly advise you Google that or go on Wikipedia, look it up. Dummies I've talked about. GERT, the graphical evaluation and review technique. Understand that GERT allows for looping, right? So it's a network diagram approach in which you can loop between activities. Schedule compression, what is it? Understand the difference between crashing and fast tracking. If I'm adding more people to my project, what am I doing? I'm crashing. If I'm adding more time to my project, maybe overtime, I'm crashing. Throwing more resources at my project, I'm crashing. Right? Fast tracking is all about doing things in parallel and doing two activities in parallel. Now, fast tracking makes the most sense when you work on critical path activities, because those are the activities that you need to attack to shorten the project. So you can fast track anything, but you get more bang for your buck when you do it on critical path activities. Schedule baseline. Understand what the schedule baseline is. It's a particular version of the schedule that has been approved. So the schedule baseline is the approved schedule for the project that you're following. Now there's lots more in chapter 6. It's a huge chapter. Again, go to the glossary, pick out the relevant stuff, make sure you understand. Chapter 7, earn value. Earn value is really all about how much work have I got done and what is that work worth. For example, if tomorrow I'm going to be working on a project and today I am planning how much that work is going to be worth, I need to do it very carefully. Why? Because when I get to the end of tomorrow, they're going to hold me accountable based on how much I said the work was worth. So that's why we call earn value the budgeted cost of work performed. It's budgeted. So if you budget that the work you perform is worth a particular amount, it had better be as close to that value as possible, because the value of the work is the value you place on it. For example, if you're working on a project and I say, look, I don't agree with you guys, this work is actually worth a lot more. It's worth 30 million and you're saying it's worth 20 million. We need to iron out all our misunderstandings before we agree on the budget, the budgeted cost for that work. Otherwise, when you start working on the project and you can't come in at 20 million, they're going to hold you accountable. But if you come in under 30 million and they agreed that the budgeted cost of that work was 30 million, then good for you. So you always want to be as accurate as possible. Let me give you this very easy question. We're working on a project and we accomplish $5 worth of work. What's the earned value? The answer is $5. $5 worth of work means the earned value is 5. Another example, we're working on a project, we've spent 20 million and we've accomplished $5 million worth of work. What's the earned value? The answer is still 5 million. It doesn't matter how much money you have spent. The big question at the end of the day is, how much have you accomplished? What's the earned value? And that's why management takes this very seriously. I remember those dreadful meetings every Tuesday where we had to report on earned value for all of our projects. And not just that, we'll actually look into the graphs and look at the trend over time of not just earned value, but CPI and SPI and SV and CV. And if there had been a downward trend for a while, not good. So do understand what exactly earned value is in your own words. Now the reason why I'm talking about this is on the exam it's not going to be verbatim. Oh, SPI is this, your AC is this, your PV is this, what is earned value. It's not going to be like that. Alright, it's going to be a little bit different. You're going to have to apply the formula and derive what the earned value is, or derive what those other metrics are in a roundabout fashion. It may not even involve any calculations. It could just be management wants to know this. What metric will tell them that? So you need to be all over this, alright? So EV, PV, AC, know what those are, what those mean. CPI, SPI, all that, know what it means. The big trick is, first of all, understand what those metrics are to start with. Know what those metrics are. But going a little bit further, understand that if we're calculating the CPI, earned value is always in front, SPI, earned value is always in front, SP, earned value is always in front, and so on. So talking about Chapter 7 formulas, in a nutshell, understand what exactly BCWP is, BCWS, ACWP. Understand the formulas, know that earned value always comes first. If you're not sure of this stuff, look for our earned value management videos on YouTube. Talking about TCPI, understand you've got two types of TCPI. You've got TCPI based on the BAC and EAC. Again, we've got a video on those. Make sure you know those. Make sure you know what TCPI is, what it tells you, and how to calculate it. Alright? Understand your EAC based on the CPI and the SPI. Understand your EAC based on the CPI alone. We've got various formulas in the PMBOK guide about this, and EAC based on work being performed at the budgeted rate. Understand how these formulas are used. You might want to look into the videos if you're not sure about this. They're all on YouTube on our channel. Key things to remember: burn rate. Remember, burn rate, not talked about in the PMBOK guide, might be useful. AC divided by EV, or 1 divided by CPI. Understand the concept of depreciation, very important. Understand direct and indirect costs. Cost applied directly to things on the project, direct, and overhead, indirect. Order of magnitude estimates I've talked about previously. Know the definition for those. Understand how accurate they are. PERT analysis I've talked about. Know the formula, standard deviation, and so on. Here we've got some of those accuracy terms I was talking about. Order of magnitude is -25 to +75% accurate, right? Budget estimate is between -10 to +25%, and definitive estimate is -5 to +10%. You might want to go learn a little bit more about those. You can actually Google them, learn more. Chapter 8. Chapter 8 is all about the tools and the techniques and the processes in a practical sense. So if you do not know what a Pareto chart is, or a run chart, or a scatter diagram, or you don't know what the upper control limit is, or you don't know what the LCL is, it means that you've missed something. The rule of 7, when is a process out of control? What do we need to do with that? The term assignable cause, what does that mean? Cause and effect diagrams, flowcharting, statistical sampling, DOE, design of experiments, benchmarking, control charts, cost of quality, now cost of conformance and cost of non-conformance. If you don't know those terms, it's a red flag. It means you need to go back. Remember, the main aim of this quick brain dump session is to make sure that you're up to speed. If you don't know these terms, not good. If you've got enough time, why don't you reschedule your exam? Because you don't want to, you don't want to do badly on it. So my advice to you is, if lots of these things seem foreign to you and you don't feel comfortable with it, just reschedule. The last thing you want to happen, is to get struck 3 times by this thing. So strongly advise you, if you don't know these terms, you might want to reschedule your exam, because these are very basic terms. There's a lot more in the PMBOK guide, but these are like the critical key ones I'm addressing here, and it's not an all-inclusive list. Chapter 9. Talking about Chapter 9, it's very important that you understand human resource management, because out of 8 processes in executing, you've got 3. In here you've got acquire project team, develop project team, and manage project team, all in executing. In executing you've got 8 processes. On the exam, 27% of the exam is from executing. So we're talking about a large chunk that's in HR, which means you have to read human resource management. Don't take it for granted. Put some work into it. Understand all the theories. Understand who postulated those theories, whether it's Maslow's or McGregor or Herzberg or Victor Vroom or whoever. Understand that. X and Y, theory X, theory Y. Understand that. The 5 stages of team development. And really understanding soft skills in a practical sense, which means Appendix G needs to be read. Appendix G in the PMBOK guide will talk about all of these interpersonal skills, soft skills, as we know them. That is so important for your exam. Chapter 10, the only calculation here is on the number of channels, n times n minus 1 divided by 2, which isn't that difficult, but the other things in communication. Understand the process of communication, understand where your stakeholders come in, understand what the communications management plan involves. Going back a slide, I should have mentioned, understand what developing your human resource plan involves, because that is a loaded document. So, talking about chapter 11, big thing here is EMV, expected monetary value, probability times impact. Page 299 in the PMBOK guide, decision tree analysis. I strongly advise you go through that in detail, know exactly what is being talked about, and be able to solve lots of decision tree analysis problems. Okay? If you do not have additional aids to study for the exam and you're a member of the PMI, why not go to the PMI website and go to the free books, books247.com. Why not go there? You know, it's called e-reads and reference on the PMI site. Why not go there and look for more information about decision tree analysis? Try some problems. Definitely an area you need to master. Chapter 12. This is all about procurement, as you know. So contract types, fixed price contracts, cost reimbursable, point of total assumption, very important one. Read it up on Wikipedia. Talking about things like the seller and the buyer and which contracts are best for the seller, which ones are good for the buyer, that kind of stuff, or which one is best. Understanding that the buyer would like to fix the price down and that's what works best. Know that. So that's chapter 12 at a high level, but the contract types, fixed price, cost reimbursable, T&M, know those in and out and all the variants of the cost reimbursable, all the variants of the fixed price contracts. Very important. Going into professional and social responsibility. Very soon this area is going to be mixed up with the knowledge areas, and you won't be required to think about it as a standalone area because it will be so blended in. So culture shock, customary fee, being ethnocentric, having respect, being honest, understanding what to do in a conflict of interest scenario. Those terms and phrases are so important. So the PMI Code of Ethics and Professional Conduct talks about respect and honesty and conflict of interest, and understand that there's nothing wrong in customary fee. You're bound to have culture shock if you go elsewhere. Not good to be ethnocentric. Things like that. You will have to read the questions very carefully and just think about what would the PMI do. That would be the right answer. Okay? Typically the answers in those scenarios are not what you would do in the real world. For example, you would probably choose to take another route than do anything that will make you look like a tattletale, right? But in the world of the PMI, guess what? You have to do that. And in the real world, you are expected to do that. Okay? So if you know that people are not meeting standards or expectations, or they're doing what is not in the best interest of the organization, and you don't let the relevant authorities know, not good in the world of the PMI. Talking about order and definitions, understanding the order of the knowledge areas. If you're taking the CAPM, understand the order of anything, knowledge areas, process groups, processes, anything. Understand the order. Okay, what comes first? ITTOs and their uses. I can't talk about that enough. We've got videos that talk all about ITTOs. You do need to know your ITTOs in detail. Okay? And all the other things that you've got on the screen are really just talking about Key things you need to know, such as deliverables being an output of which process, validated deliverables are an output of what process, where do we use variance analysis, where's analogous estimating used as a tool and technique, and all that. Questions to think about. Where do we use a WBS? It's an input to what? Is it an input to anything? Can you find the WBS as an input in the PMBOK guide? I don't think so. Things like that, trick questions like that. The project management plan is an input too, then you of course know all that. Anything that happens after planning, monitoring and controlling, closing, executing, of course you need your project management plan. Could the project management plan be an input to, for example, develop project charter or identify stakeholders? No. What about the project management plan being an input to plan risk management? No. Why? Because we are working on a component of the risk management plan. So don't fall for cheap tricks like that. Okay? So whenever you think about the project management plan, know where it is used. Okay? As an input. Very important. Think about the process and think about where. This is not an all-conclusive list. The list actually goes all the way down. Just showing you this here. Scope baseline is an input to where. Where did it come from and where is it used? So you can see that the scope baseline is an input to all of these processes. You need to know these things. Alright? Understanding that change requests are an input to perform integrated change control. Stuff like that. Change requests come from all of these processes. Go to that process. Okay? Understand that. And that is the end of a quick review of PMP and CAPM top formulas and terms. Now, before I go, I'll let you know lots of people complain about risk management on the exam. You might want to think about risk management as a very, very different area, because it's so easy to mishmash all sorts of knowledge areas together and serve you a load of risk management questions. And if you haven't read those areas in detail, it will be hard. Talking about risk management, there are some keywords I should highlight for you. The first one is secondary risk. Next one is residual risk. Also think about risks being on a watch list. Think about what a contingency is. What is the difference between a contingency reserve and a management reserve? What is the difference between passive acceptance and active acceptance? What is acceptance? What do we call it when we throw a bunch of money at a risk? We say, oh, if it happens, we'll apply these funds. That's acceptance, but that's active acceptance. And I've talked about this in other videos, so do understand what makes these strategies for negative risks or threats different from other strategies. For example, what makes acceptance different from mitigation? What makes mitigation different from transfer? What makes transfer different from the last one? And going on to strategies for positive risks and opportunities, what makes them different? Why are they so different? Am I able to decipher when I am sharing a risk and when I'm exploiting a risk and when I'm enhancing a risk, or when I'm just accepting a positive risk? Things like that. Understand what a risk owner is. Understand what a risk action item owner is. Understand the responsibility of risk management. Okay? Best way to test your knowledge, www.pmpmockexam.com. All the best to you as you study for the exam. Make sure you study daily. Hit those books hard. Get it over and done with quickly. No need dragging it out for the next 1 year, 2 years. Why do that? Get it done now and enjoy it.